Hello, I'm Rabbi Bodkins, and I'd like to talk about what it is we're celebrating today. We are celebrating the immortality of Torah. Let's go back over the history a little bit. Roshim Bar Yochai was one of the 5 students of Rabbi Akiva. After Rabbi Akiva had lost all 24,000 students, and he was mimed, he set up 5 new students to continue on the Torah that he taught, the Torah Shabbal Peh, which would have been lost. It's another reason why we celebrate Lag BOmer. It doesn't make sense, actually. We're celebrating the fact that the plague ended, but the plague ended, that's because there was no one left. All 24,000 students died. But not that. After the plague ended, Rabbi Akiva immediately found 5 new students and started to teach them the entire Torah Shabbal Peh. So we're not celebrating that the plague ended as much as we're celebrating that he was able to continue teaching Torah. And that's the Torah that we have today. One of those 5 students, his name was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was very close to his Rebbe. Years later, when the Gezerah that you weren't allowed to teach Torah anymore came out, and Rabbi Akiva was caught, Roshim Bar Yochai was one of the people that stood there and had to watch as his Rebbe was tortured to death. Afterwards, Roshim Bar Yochai was overheard saying something against the Roman government. Somebody had praised the Roman government, what they had done for the people of Eretz Yisrael. And he said, what do? They build roads so they can charge us tolls to go on the roads. They build bathhouses for their own pleasures. They build marketplaces to take our money. What do they do for us? One of the people that he was talking to was an informer. And a price was put on Roshim Bar Yochai's head. He went into hiding at first in a local synagogue, and his wife would bring him meals. And then when the Romans started looking for him, he didn't want to put his wife into danger, so he took his son and the 2 of them ran away to a little town called Pekin. I've always wanted to see where he was hiding, and actually a couple of years ago I was able to see the cave. He went into a cave with his son. What are we going to live on? What are we going to eat? Whoever accepts on himself to learn Torah for Torah's sake, Kadosh Baruch Hu takes away from the worry of having to make a living and the worry of having to deal with the government. He went into the cave, and a brook came up through the cave, which they were able to use for water. A carob tree grew over the mouth of the cave, which covered the cave from everyone, so you couldn't see that there was a cave there. And he had carobs to eat. Kol Mekabel al Torah. He accepted himself to learn for Torah's sake. Ma'avir mimenu o malchus. He didn't have to worry about the government finding him. V'ol derech eretz. He had his food and water in front of him. They didn't know how long they were going to be there, so they took off the one set of clothing that they had, buried them, and then you couldn't learn Torah that way, so they buried themselves in the sand up to their necks. They would come out 3 times a day to daven and put on their clothes. And then the rest of the time they learned. Shimon Bar Yochai and his son. They learned with such intensity and such devotion, they were given a gift from Shemaim. Eliyahu Hanavi himself came and taught them secrets of the Torah that had not been taught since the day the Torah was given. They stayed like this for 12 years. At the end of 12 years, Eliyahu Hanavi told them that Caesar had died, and there's no longer a price on their head, and they can come out of the cave. When they came out, they were so learning with such intensity for 12 years, they didn't realize their own spiritual power that they had developed. And Reb Shimon did not understand that other people live in the world where you have to work with the world. And he saw a group of Jews farming the fields. He looked at them angrily. Why aren't they learning Torah? Because he looked at them, they died. Eliyahu Navi came back to him and said, you didn't learn how to deal with the rest of the world. Go back to the cave. And he stayed for another full year. On one Friday morning, Eliyahu Navi came to him and said, you can go out. You've learned your lesson. He came out and he saw a boy carrying 2 myrtle branches. And he asked him, how'd you get those myrtle branches? And he said, I plowed a field, I planted a myrtle tree, I grew it, and I cut it per Shabbos. He said, why'd you cut 2? Could have just cut 1. He said, but Rebbe, the Torah says, Shomor v'Zochor. Shomer es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. Guard the Shabbos to keep it holy. Zochor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. Remember the Shabbos to keep it holy. 2 branches, 1 for Shomer, 1 for Zochor. Rav Shimon said, now I understand. You can live with both. And he went back home. He was nursed back to health. He and his son were nursed back to health after surviving on nothing but carb and water and having to live in the sand. They had sores covering every part of their bodies. And they came back to themselves. Years later, after teaching Torah for many, many years, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was on his deathbed. And it was the night of Lag BOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer. And he was surrounded, he had called for all his students, he was surrounded by his students, and he taught them for the first time the secrets that Eliyahu Navi had taught him. And as he was teaching them, a bright light had shined from him that turned the night into day because of the intensity of his Torah and his love and his devotion. Hence the bonfires of Lag BOmer night. He saw one of his students crying, and he said, what are you crying for? He said, Rebbe, you're leaving us. Why shouldn't I cry? He said, this isn't a time to cry. It's a time to celebrate. I'm dying a natural death. I'm dying while teaching Torah, while teaching secrets of the Torah that haven't been revealed since the time the Torah was given. This is a time to celebrate and should be used as a time to celebrate for generations to come. When he died, they transcribed his words into a sefer, named after the fact that there was a shining light that came from Reb Shimon. And they called it Zohar, which means shining light. And on that day, Jews from all over the world celebrate by lighting bonfires, singing and dancing, and celebrating the immortality of our Torah. I recently heard an interesting question. When Moshe Rabbeinu died, on Zayin Adar, some people fast on that day. We don't skip Tachnun. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu's death mourned and Shimon Bar Yochai is celebrated? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, because the people were so distraught, the thousands of halachas were forgotten and had to be got back through learning and pilpul, through discussion and argument. Torah was forgotten. When Shimon Bar Yochai died, he taught Zohar, and more Torah was learned on the day of his death. So we're not celebrating the passing of Shimon Bar Yochai. We're celebrating the Torah that came from his passing. People might ask, why do we have to be in this kind of situation? Quarantines, lockdowns, in this time of year. If we think about it, Shimon Bar Yochai raised to his greatest heights when he was in a situation worse than what we're in. He was in quarantine. He was in lockdown for 12 years, plus an extra year. And he raised to his greatest heights. This is the time we're supposed to be rising to heights. Developing parts of ourselves that we didn't have before. Ways of learning that we weren't able to do or we didn't need to do. Because we had our shuls, because we had our beis medrash. We didn't have to stay home and learn. We didn't have to find inventive ways to continue learning Torah. Kadosh Baruch Hu was giving us an opportunity at a time we're supposed to be growing in our learning and growing in our Yer Shamayim. A different way to grow. A way to grow which is similar to Rishim Yohai. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful Lag BOmer, a time of growth, and a time that we can recognize the beauty and the immortality of our Torah and our people.